the heart and soul behind every business. Stories. Welcome to Business Story of the Week, hosted by me, Joshua Laurie. From setbacks to comebacks, from tragedies to triumphs, we inspire entrepreneurs through conversations that matter. Witness the magic that turns dreams into reality. Whether it's your career, business, or life, your success is always one story away. This is Business Story of the Week.
Hi, this is Marie Monville, and this is Business Story of the Week.
And ladies and gentlemen, that is Marie Monville, our guest for today, and I am your host, of course, Joshua. And today's question is, why do so many people hate their jobs? And what can we do to change that? Well, Marie is exactly the person or the guest to answer that question today for us, and much, much more, of course. With a degree in organizational behavior and a talent for asking the right questions, I hope that was the right question, by the way, Marie turns workplaces into thriving environments. Her approach includes understanding business dynamics, conducting organization health assessments, and enhancing trust based communication, which leads, of course, to long term success. She's led seminars, developed courses, and cultivated vibrant communities. Her clients have increased revenues, created systems that increase productivity, and overcome obstacle based mindset. She helps others understand the connection between emotional health and overall life satisfaction. That is a topic we love here on the show, of course. Marie has written 2 books and hosts a weekly podcast herself, focused on personal development, and she often gets her best ideas when walking on her favorite wooden path. And today she is going to walk that path with us and hopefully get more insights and perspective. Thank you for coming on the show, Marie. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Marie, first off, we need to talk a little bit about that path. What was that favorite wooden path? Is this just like behind your house, somewhere close, maybe less than 5 minutes away? Why is it your
Yeah.
favorite wooden path?
It is about 5 minutes from my house, just down
Wow.
the street, down the hill, through our
Mhm,
neighborhood. And it's beautiful, wooded. It runs right along a stream. It's very
mhm.
peaceful. And I
Wow.
find, that place of connection in nature, just being able to get out of my head a little bit if I'm
Mhm.
working from home. It's a great place to get a fresh perspective and be able to let some things go. I think we all need to do that sometimes.
Absolutely. I subscribe to that activity. I love going out in nature. I live in a place where there's a lot of trees, a lot of trails. I always try to go as often as I could. Clears the mind, clears your head,
Mhm.
gets you a little more, you know, relaxed, a little more creative and less stressed
Yes,
definitely if you're thinking about a lot of things. But Leslie, you
absolutely.
talk about organizational behavior.
Mhm.
You work with clients, you work with organizations, but what I want to know first and foremost is what was the what was the young Marie like? What was the young
Mm.
Marie like when she did she always know she was going to get into organizational behavior? I want to know, was the young Marie
Yeah.
always, you know, always wanted to walk that wooden path? Was she always a nature lover?
When I think about myself as a child, I was so different. I was very shy, very reserved, but I do think that I got a lot of practice in this because I'm a middle child. I have an older brother and a younger sister, and they fought all the time. So I learned how to make peace and how to understand people's feelings and
Of
all of the
course.
things that really matter.
Always the mediator,
Yes,
never the favorite, never the
right.
never the trusted sibling or the trusted child. I relate, Mary.
Yes.
By the way,
Yeah.
I relate. I am also a bit of a child myself. They said we've had to raise ourselves in a way. We've had to learn to be independent because the attention wasn't on
Mhm.
us. It's always either with the youngest, the sweetest, the cutest, or
Yes.
the oldest, who's always the most reliable. But somehow, we've learned to rely on ourselves. And Mary, and I think
Mhm.
this is uh, very important in the sense of how we approach our lives. I feel like being reliable is something that we all want to be, you know, to be to be to be seen as, right?
Mhm.
Whether you're a middle
Yeah.
child or the eldest child and whatnot. But when it comes to organizational behavior, how does emotional intelligence come in? Because you said you talk about you're always the one, making peace, looking at like how does my younger sibling feel? How is the eldest treating me? How do we
Mhm.
see how does emotional intelligence come into this? But more specifically, how does it come into leadership development? How do they intersect?
Well, you started off the introduction by talking about how many people hate their jobs. And the statistic is that over 80% of full-time workers hate their
Oh,
job. And
wow.
it's not that they don't like what they do. They actually love what they do, but it's four main things. It's organizational policies, managerial
Of course,
conflict,
of
coworker
course.
relationships, and lack of opportunity for growth. So when we look at those things and say, okay, if somebody's going to spend the majority of their adult life working, they really shouldn't hate it. And how can we make it better? That's
Wow.
where emotional intelligence comes in, having empathy, not just looking at the surface level behavior and thinking, okay, I'm frustrated with this person because they're doing whatever, but why are they doing that? And is there a way that I can help them better understand? Am I self aware of my own emotions? Am I good at regulating them? Can I turn negatives into positives? Do I know how to view things not just as obstacles, but
Yes,
opportunities?
of
Am I
course.
an effective communicator? Because you think about a lot of challenges in people dynamics, whether it's
Hmm.
coworker relationships or between a
Hmm.
manager and employee. A lot of times it comes down to ineffective communication. Someone
That's it.
received a message that maybe wasn't the intention. So
Yes.
there are so many places where aspects of emotional intelligence really come into play.
And I think that also applies a lot. Of course, it applies in our personal lives, right? But in
Hmm.
the business workplace, it's just not so normal. It's not so regular. It's not
Right.
something that's being practiced a lot. First off, I want to, by the way, I do apologize if I kept saying that wrong. Marie or Mary?
It's Marie, but that's
I
okay.
s-
I get
oh
Mary a
my
lot
goodness.
too.
I
Yeah.
think I think
Yeah.
I said it right the first time,
You
and
did.
and
You did.
and I switched back, and I oh my goodness. But I
Yeah.
mean that's it. That's it. I think I want to apply that emotional intelligence on here, of course,
Hmm.
because it's exactly the
Sure.
topic we're talking about. Because no one wants their name to be mispronounced.
That's
Like
okay.
that's something that is near and dear to our hearts. But we want to be able to connect, to relate, and the first thing,
Hmm.
of course, is knowing people by their first name, and just knowing where how they feel, how they react,
Right.
how they approach things, especially when it comes to your workplace. Like you said, they don't hate what they're doing, they love what they're doing, but my goodness, the workplace culture is so toxic. And how many times have we approached that? In your experience with working with a lot of clients and a lot of organizations, what was the main thing that was very difficult to transform when it comes to organizational culture?
Well, I think, the open door is when an organization realizes that they have a problem. And they're not just
Hmm.
looking at their people, they're not just looking at all the team members and saying, okay, these people have a problem, but when they're willing to say, hey, we have a problem, let's own this, let's dig
Hmm.
in, let's figure out what we need to do across the board in leadership. How do we kind of do this from the top down? How do we make sure
Hmm.
that everybody's on the same page and that we really are creating a culture where everyone thrives? That's the ideal. I love walking into a company where that is the case. But sometimes, you deal with someone who's saying, "Hey, my people are the problem." And that's when it's
Well,
hard because it's
well,
never just one-sided. We all
yes,
can do better. There are things about all of us that we do well, but even our strengths can become our weaknesses. So I think the hard part is that aspect often of self-awareness,
mhm,
because when we miss that, when we're not aware of what's going on in ourselves, it's really hard to make an impact and help somebody else.
of course, and that's definitely really, really is highlighted or magnified when it comes to organizations and comes to companies. There's always this top-down thing, like Marie, like when it comes to, of course, as above, so below, right? Would you
Right.
say that there is less self-awareness up there, the managerial side or the middle managers, or as opposed to, of course, the workplaces and the common people, so to speak? Would you say there's a lot less self-awareness, that is why it's trickling down and it's just creating this really bad culture?
I would say when there is a lack of self-awareness in leadership, it's more
Mhm.
obvious. You see it
Oh,
more readily than you will in just your average team member because
I
the
see.
leader is having such a direct impact on so many people. And I do think self-awareness is one of those things that often shows up as a missing component in leadership. But the
Right.
great thing is that once we have an awareness, our brain already starts to work on it. So
That's
it's
it.
not that hard to fix if there's a
Oh,
willingness there to work
interesting.
on it.
If
Yeah.
there's a willingness, that is the key right
Yes.
there. And I think
Yes.
it also applies in personal life, right? Like you know
Mhm.
exactly what the person needs to fix. Often as
Yeah.
we know it ourselves, but it's the
Yes.
willingness to put in the work, to put in the dirty work, to practice it, to change.
Mhm.
I know what I need to change. I don't want to put in the work, and I feel like
Right.
it's so much more harder in the workplace because especially if you're a manager or you're up there because you've been validated, like you're
Mhm.
there for a reason. You're like you
Right.
are there because you're qualified. So what is it that I need to change? I don't need to change anything. Marie, how do you
Mhm.
approach this? How do you approach this when it comes to you meet leadership, you meet management that are just refusing to change, or do you even work with leadership like that at all if they
Mhm.
don't want to change?
Yeah, for me, it really comes back to that place of asking questions. Because if
Hmm.
I can ask a question that helps them to make the realization on their own, that is so
Hmm.
much more powerful than me simply telling them something.
I love
They
that.
are far more likely to buy into it if it was their idea. So it's really about understanding them, understanding why they think their way is right or why they
Hmm.
think their way is working, and then helping them to identify places where it isn't, and then coming back into dig a little bit deeper and say, okay, well, let's figure out why this doesn't feel like it's working to
Right,
you, or
right.
what you see that you want to change. What are some objectives that maybe have been set by the company for you that you
Mm,
feel like you're struggling to hit? Let's figure out why those things are hard. And oftentimes it comes back to those places of self-awareness or other aspects of emotional intelligence. So I think it's
mhm,
leading with the place that they want to achieve, and then
mhm,
helping them to see how they're going to be able to get there faster and at a much more efficient rate by doing some work inside. And I love the connection that you keep making to personal life, because
mm.
while we go after these strategies for the organization's benefit, they get the knowing that they are making a difference in
Yes,
their employees' lives as a whole.
yes.
And this is going to trickle down into families and
Mm.
communities and have such a positive impact all around.
And of course, we mentioned this also earlier in your introduction. You know the right questions to ask. It's about asking
Yes.
the right questions.
Yes.
Marie, if the workplace was a garden, what are the essential elements? What are the essential questions to ask that you need to ask, that anyone needs to ask, by the way, to cultivate a thriving environment?
Well, I think oftentimes when we want something to look beautiful, like a garden, we think about, okay, what are all the things I need to make this look good? If you're planting
Uh-huh.
a garden, you need seeds, you need adequate
Uh-huh.
sunlight and water and all that stuff. But before you ever plant the seed, you're going to have a much better return if you're tending to the soil. So I
That's
always
it.
come in that place of the health assessment to say, okay, what is working here? What's not working here? What do we
Interesting.
need to change before we ever really go after this place of culture? Because those things, those foundational elements, if we're not asking those questions and we're just trying to
Uh-huh.
make it look good, it's not gonna support itself because there's nothing there in the foundation. So it's really coming in and saying, all right, tell me about what's going on here. Tell me about what you love about your team. Tell me about
Mhm.
what is working for you, what's not working for you. I love talking to the individual members. Even just
Right.
a 15-minute conversation in small groups, you can find so many themes that, a lot of times people are hesitant to tell leadership or management how they really
Right.
feel. They don't want to be authentic. They're not sure they can trust, but they'll
Yes.
tell an outsider when they know, okay, this isn't, they're not going to report exactly what
Mm,
I'm saying.
mm, mm.
I'm looking for those themes to say, okay,
Oh,
what's the
interesting.
takeaway here? What can we use? What can we glean? And even what are they not saying? Sometimes, it's not about the direct answer to the question, but it's about all of the nuances that, and
Yes.
even sometimes the things that they're not telling you.
Yes, exactly. I love that. It's always those small details. You want to
Yes.
fertilize your garden bed. You want the soil to be rich. You want an open environment where everyone gets to share. Everyone feels heard.
Hmm.
Everyone feels comfortable sharing their mind without fear of repercussions. And I think that's so common wherever you are, whichever workplace that you are, especially if you're running a business too, right? Like you have
Hmm.
to be able to cultivate this kind of environment. Marie, if the garden bed, the soil is a way to start cultivating this kind of open environment, how do we then keep watering? What would be the questions so we can continue to water these seeds? We can continue to water these the workplace, the workforce. What would be the right questions to continuously ask them? So it's not it so it doesn't just start, like start and then it doesn't
Right.
continue. How do we
Hmm.
keep this going? What are those questions to ask?
Yeah, it's really all about relationship. And I think a lot of times in a workplace, we get so focused on the day to day, the tasks,
Mhm.
the projects,
Of course.
the actual components of the work. But
Hmm.
where those connections are formed more quickly is in those bonds of trust. And that often
Right.
happens through outside life experiences. People
Oh.
call them those water cooler moments, those
Oh, of
conversations that we
course.
have that have nothing to do with whatever our projects are for the day, but really
Mhm.
are this place where we find common bonds with each other.
Mhm.
We all as humans have this desire to be seen and known and heard, to feel like
Mhm.
we've had some kind of meaningful exchange. And generally that happens more quickly in topics that relate to our personal life rather than our work experience. So I think it's
Interesting.
it's continuing to ask those questions that, especially for a leader, help you get to know your people. What do you even know about them? It's a great
Mhm.
self-assessment for a leader to say, okay, what do I know about my team that's more than just what they do when they're here? What
Mhm.
do I know about them as a person? Do I know them as a person? Am I building those places
That's
of
it.
connection? Am I relating to them? Am I sharing
Mm.
in equal ways to however they're sharing with me to build those bonds of trust? Because that's going to help
Yes.
solidify and move it along so much more quickly than just trying to forge trust through the relationship that you make in the workday.
Yeah, and it's not like forced trust also. Like, I mean, of course they're forced
Mhm.
to say yes. Like there's always
Right.
that sense of like
Yeah.
I'm gonna trust you because I have to. I feel like giving that freedom of like, hey, you can say no, you can say your peace of mind.
Mhm.
But I love that it happens in those little moments outside of work. But Marie, I think this is a common thing or a common worry for a lot of our audience and listeners, business owners, entrepreneurs, career people, career women, career men. Um, how do you balance that? I feel like it's a sensitive balancing act because I want to
Sure.
relate to my employees, I want to relate to my team in a very genuine manner. Like I want them to know that hey, I'm here for you. I want to take care of you. I know you're stressed. I know you're sick. Not gonna force you to work through that. But how do you balance then that you're a little too friendly now and people don't want to now they feel like they kind of start pushing that envelope, they kind of start pushing that boundaries. How do you balance a sense of genuine connection but also making sure that hey, these are your deadlines, these are what I expect you to do and you need to deliver them? How do you cultivate that kind of relationship, that kind of environment?
I think it happens through fun. If we think about one of the ways that we learn and work best, it's through games. And so I
Mm,
always encourage organizations to bring in that element of gamification, bringing some fun into it, some kind of challenge. People are motivated by a lot of different factors, and some of them are pretty competitive with themselves, competitive with each other. So if you can find a way to make it fun, you're going to see that return on investment, keeping that place of efficiency and really helping them to enjoy it. And, if for companies that aren't doing that right now, I think it's keeping goals clear, making sure
right.
that everyone has clarity on what it is that they're supposed to be doing, what the deadlines are, how
Mhm,
you're going to celebrate those wins.
mhm.
One of the things I think a lot of us don't do well is celebrate small wins. We all want to celebrate the big moments, those milestones, but the truth is
Yes,
that if we're not consistent in the day to day, we're never going to get there. We're never going to
at
get
all.
to those big moments anyway.
Of
So
course.
encourage your team to celebrate their small wins. You celebrate their small wins.
Of course.
Calling out an employee for doing something over and above, or executing well, or whatever it is, it's
Of
going to
course.
inspire others who are going to want that too. So it just breeds into that culture of respect and honor and communication and hard work.
I love that. I love that. And of course, when you see that when you see those things around you, you see people practicing the same things, you're treated the
Mhm.
same. You're treated like you matter, right? You're
Yes.
treated like
Yeah.
everything that you do is like, hey, I see you. I hear you. These
Mhm.
are what you've achieved, and that helped us out a lot. And I think that goes a long way. And yeah, why not? I mean, you can still tell them that these are the goals. These are what we need to reach. You didn't reach this,
Mhm.
but hey, let's get right back into it, and maybe encourage them with a little gamification. I love it. Marie,
Yes. Yes.
how about self now? Like as we
Yeah.
start wrapping this up, how about self? Of course, the website is elevatedsolutionsconsulting.com, and I feel
Yes.
like when it comes to elevating the workplace, it starts with yourself. And
It does.
what would
Yeah.
be my question would be here is what would be the daily questions then that you should be asking yourself in order to elevate yourself first so you can
Mhm.
elevate those around you?
Oh, I love that. I think it really comes down to asking ourselves, am I living from a place of joy? Do I
Oh,
enjoy what I'm doing?
God,
Am I sharing that joy with others? And if I'm not, what do I need to do to change that? A lot of
I
times
see.
people are taking stress from home into work, or stress from work back home.
Mhm.
Is there a way to give yourself even just 5 minutes that
Mhm.
helps you transition? If your home
I
life is
love that.
stressful before you get into work, if your work
I love
life is
that.
stressful before you come back home, find a way to let that go so that you can be fully present where you are.
Mhm.
Find the things that you enjoy. Our perspective becomes what we live. And so if we're looking at things, identifying all the negatives, we're going to have a much more negative life experience. But if we're saying, okay, yeah, I get it. These negatives exist. Everybody is going through something. But what's the
Yes.
good that I can find here? What are the positives in myself, in my circumstances? We're going to have a much more positive experience. So I think it's, doing those self assessments to say, what do I need to change?
Yes.
What's the good that I can find? And then
Yes.
what's the good that I can identify in somebody else?
I
Looking
love that.
for those places to give someone else a compliment, it makes them feel good. It makes us feel good. It has such a positive effect all around. So that those are just three simple things that we can do that are really going to help us to elevate ourselves. And then it gives us the opportunity to ask more questions, because that's what it's all about. Continuing down that path of asking ourselves good questions, asking others good questions, and helping not just us to create a life we love, but everybody else too.
And of course, asking the right questions allows us the opportunity to keep improving, to keep building on
Yes.
that, to keep
Yes,
building on ourselves so that we can
for sure.
build it others around us as well. Marie, I love it. I love the organizing. I always love these topics. You see, because it always comes back to like, are people treated like commodities, or we treat them like
Mhm.
humans? And that's why I always
Right.
love inviting guests over here to talk about that, because I feel that that's a message. It's very important to continuously talking about that so we can change that culture. So we approach people differently. But it's one thing to talk about it, but I love that you are giving these real actionable steps, these real questions that could actually really, really change how we approach the workplace culture. So again, the website is elevatedsolutionsconsulting.com. Go check that out so you can work out with Marie. And Marie, of course, is on Instagram, on LinkedIn. Where else can we find you, Marie? And we'd love to get connect and love to get to know you.
Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn, as well as the website. It's such an opportunity to be on here. I appreciate so much this conversation, and I think it's one that we all need to have. We all need to be asking ourselves these
Absolutely.
questions.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing all of this, Marie. And we should definitely, I invite our audience listeners, check out Marie, check out her website. And of course, remember to ask those questions to the people around you, help build themselves up, and ask those questions to yourself as well. Marie, thank you so much for joining us today on this episode.
Absolutely. It was my privilege.
To all our audience and listeners out there, thank you for watching the episode. I hope you enjoyed this one. You guys know how much I love this topic. I hope you guys love it as well. Marie has shared so much insights today. We'll see you on the next one.
All right, so here's the thing. We try to get a little bit better every day, but we can't do it without you. So if you like the video, make sure to like and subscribe below. And if you have any comments, just leave them in the space under.